You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
You want to say that again?
No.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello.
Who doesn't want to repeat what he just said.
That's been the reality of my life many, many times.
Yeah.
Usually, I learn that too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You spent a lot of your life repeating it?
I did.
Yeah, I know.
And I've learned to bite my lip and not say it.
So would you say that's wisdom?
I think that's cost awareness.
Yeah. Which we've talked about. We haven't done a show exclusively, but I'm writing that down. We haven't done a show exclusively. We allude to that oftentimes, but I don't know that we've ever come right out and really done a whole show on what we mean by that. So that's something we should do in the future.
And would you define that?
So we both believe that there is an emotional and sociological economy, and that people have to pay a cost for their reactions, and that if you actually become aware of that, then you are more in control of the way that people interpret you, and you can actually reduce the amount of social cost.
You
Absolutely.
can start by asking, how much does that cost?
Yeah.
What can I afford?
But people don't, they don't even think of that, but it's a very real thing, and the more that you are aware of it, the more that you can make choices that are better for you. I mean, maybe you want to be a curmudgeon, and that's okay.
I'm having a frustration sale. Can I sell you some of my frustration?
Can I sell you some frustration? So you frequently allude to the idea that Freud had some particularly dark ideas about laughter in specifically, but humor in general. And so I've wanted to explore that a little bit more. And so that's kind of the theme of this show. Do you want to start?
Of course.
Okay.
We were having a conversation, and I said something that Freud had said, that the source of all humor comes from, actually from the death instinct. It has to do with anger and rage.
Mm-hmm. And so from the Jungian perspective, that's anima and animus, that life and death instinct. So he kind of refined that a little bit more than Freud, but Freud was also a proponent of that.
Yeah. And you said you didn't agree.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I buy that, but I wanted to talk about it. And because to me, there are several different ways to understand humor. Humor can be aggression. Humor can be self-defense. Humor can be spontaneously physiological. And humor can be informational. So we use humor, we experience humor a lot of different ways. And what's fascinating to me is there's some research that shows cross-culturally we all understand some forms of humor. Pratfalls, sometimes defined as the lowest form of humor, like the Three Stooges, appeal to audiences around the world.
Right. But if the man slips on a banana peel and falls, are we laughing because he slipped on the banana peel, or are we laughing because he fell and hit the ground?
I don't know. That's what the research tries to determine. Sometimes it's a startle reaction. We laugh as a reaction to something that surprised us that we didn't expect. The guy slipped and almost fell. If he falls in front of a car and gets run over, then very quickly we feel shame and distress, concern about the individual. But I laughed at that, and that's not funny. We have to be taught as children socially appropriate experiences of humor, and as clinicians, sometimes you get clients in that don't know that. I remember a client that I saw for a couple of years. You had, as a businessman, had developed this hearty, hail fellow, well met burst of deep laughter, ha 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 ha, that he used as verbal punctuation, not as laughter, not as, oh, that's funny, not as, this is humorous. And our offices weren't completely soundproofed, so especially when it was loud, people in the other offices would hear it. And any number of times the other therapists in the office would ask me, how can you stand that? How can you be in the room with that? That's so irritating. And I said, that's what we're talking about in therapy. We're trying to identify that and say, this is costing you something that you don't realize you're having to pay. People avoid you. People stay away from you. People don't respond to you receptively because they're irritated by this. And humor in this case is this specific example. It could be other behaviors too. If you smack your chewing gum, if you suck your snot, there are behaviors that we do that people interpret us and reject us before we even realize it.
Right.
So you may not know that kind of behavior is harming you. But in this case, there wasn't humor. I mean, it wasn't a humorous laugh. It wasn't a laugh for a humorous reason. It was a laugh for a verbal punctuation.
Right.
So we had speech lessons. We had lessons, like some people use and so. As a way to verbally punctuate conversations. And if you're going to be a professional speaker, you have to learn not to do that. I've worked with a number of people for whom that was a goal or a job. We had to teach them, don't do and If you have to gather your thoughts, or if you make a mistake in a sentence, stop, compose yourself, and continue.
Right.
The audience will appreciate it.
Right.
So, and then sometimes humor's just funny. People laugh. They laugh spontaneously.
And what I was really struck by when I started doing and the research that I do for these are never super in depth.
Well, yeah, some of them's like Glamour magazine and stuff.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But the articles that I found, and I sent you a sample one
I
of each.
I actually liked that one, yeah. It was
we
scientifically
had
done.
one that was scientific, right, that was about what are the benefits of humor, and then we had a philosophical one, and all of the philosophical articles that I found were really dark and pensive and generally negative, and then the articles that I found about the biology of humor were really bright and uplifting and saying, laughter is such a positive elixir for the human soul.
I like that.
Yeah, but I was struck by the dichotomy of that. It was really striking.
So I didn't look to see who wrote the first article, the more philosophical one. It goes back to Plato and Locke and Hobbes and all those guys. But as I read it, I thought this is very Germanic or Russian. It's very ponderous and turgid in its writing style, which I find very difficult to read. The other one I thought was really interesting. I actually read it out loud to my wife, who also thought it was really interesting, because there's lots of scientifically based information with data about replication of the experiments that were done. That looked at, for instance, can somebody that doesn't know you, who hears you laugh, blind test, can they give an accurate representation, just from hearing that, of your social status?
Right.
And this research says most people can around the world.
And what they were talking about is the difference between dominance laughter and subservient laughter, and it was clear that was...
Is your laughter a form of sycophancy, or
perceptually
is it a form
identifiable
of domination?
Yeah. And so going back to your guy that laughed in therapy, and he had that really low, kind of robust, from that article, we would look at that and say he's laughing from a subservient position.
Well,
because
in his interpersonal social deficit areas.
Yeah.
In his business management areas, it was the opposite. It was the dominance behavior. So you have to figure the audience and the agenda.
But the article that we read said that the dominant laugh is always higher pitched and it's more spontaneous. And so if this guy had a pre-planned, a pre-packaged kind of laugh that was low,
maybe he'd read the article.
I don't know.
Come across a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that based on the information that I read from the article, having read the article, if I heard that guy laugh, I would say that guy's laughing from a place of insecurity, not from a place of...
Yeah. Well, and as a therapist, that's exactly how you would hear it. Mm-hmm. But so we're talking about laughter as the only example of humor.
Yeah.
Sometimes humor is a fact of misdirection. Mm-hmm. You have to have a setup, and you have to have a straight man who gives you the setup, and then you give the punchline, which is a misdirection. It's not what people expect you to say. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are comics who specialize in insult humor. Mm-hmm. But this article talked about that from the perspective of they have to stay within a zone. There's a very narrow window that has to do with how horrible or socially egregious the punchline is a reference to. Like you laugh because the guy slips on a banana, but then he falls in front of a train and is cut in half.
Right.
That's not acceptable as a form of laughter.
Exactly.
But somebody that makes a mistake or gets misunderstood or gets surprised can be humorous. Mm-hmm. And so some levels of humor exist where it's like a witty verbal comeback. Are you fast enough? Are you funny enough? Can you make a segue that causes people to go, what? And then laugh because it's funny. Some of it is much more involved, like the script of Blazing Saddles. Mm-hmm. And then society evolves. So over time, the script of Blazing Saddles. I remember when Blazing Saddles came out.
You could never make that movie today.
A friend of mine and I went to the theater to see it. We actually sat through it twice in a row because the audience was laughing so hard we couldn't hear all the punchlines. Yeah. And we thought we wanted to hear them. Today, I watched that movie and it's like socially offensive, egregiously assaultive. And part of the value of that approach to humor is to confront you with your social biases and make you consider that the things that you don't even know you've internalized as symbols and perceptions, you might want to look at, you might want to react to.
So let's take our break, and I'll have a question for you in this.
One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. Mm-hmm. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist. So
that's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at this. I'm a professional.
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back, and I agree with everything that you were saying before the break about how there are limits to what is funny. If you see a guy fall, that's funny. If you see a guy fall and then get run over by a train, that's not. And I agree with that 100%. And, then we were talking about, could you make Blazing Saddles today? So my question to you is, have we become too overly sensitive where it's becoming harder to be able to use, if we both agree that humor can be a therapeutic tool, have we gotten to a point where it's harder now to just let something be funny because everybody's judging the joke?
Right, and they don't agree that it's funny.
Yeah.
And they then judge you as being inappropriate because you laughed or because you said whatever it was you said in an effort to get a laugh.
Right.
Society evolves. Society goes through stages. Right now we're in a stage where things that have been laughed at in previous years, like Blazing Saddles in 1982, couldn't be made today.
Right.
But a lot of other Mel Brooks movies couldn't be made today either for the same reason.
Right.
For give an example from another movie, Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was just thinking of.
So there's a scene where Terry Garr is in the back of a hay wagon, and she asks Dr. Frankenstein if he'd like to have a roll in the hay. And Gene Wilder raises his eyebrows in reference, because a roll in the hay is a social cue for having sex. Mm-hmm. Would you like a roll in some communities? So today, that may not be a social cue anymore, because not a lot of us spend time in hay wagons anymore. Not a lot of us spend time on farms anymore.
Right.
That may be a reference that is outmoded and outdated.
You're saying that the euphemism may not work anymore.
The joke has passed. But the point of the joke, again, is misdirection. They think you're looking at one thing, and there's another thing that happens.
Yeah. So then what I hear you saying is that you think it's just a pendulum, and right now it's swung way to one side. It'll swing back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So are there things that are still funny, but in a different? I mean, so because obviously we still laugh at jokes. So let me ask the question a different way. So if we're going to live in a much more politically correct society, then where do you know where the line is? Do you have to suspend your your line of social correctness to go to a comedy show, or do you have to write jokes that fall within the parameters of that social climate?
I think both. I think one of the things that the research article we read talked about was that the development of laugh tracks was a thing that happened because people watching TV at home alone weren't laughing at the punchlines.
Yeah.
Or if they did, they felt really, really foolish. And so they included a laugh track to give you not only a cue, but to give you the illusion of being part of a larger audience, as if you were in a theater somewhere and we're all laughing together.
Because apparently one of the products that is essential for humor to be activated is the presence of other people.
Social environment. Yeah. I remember going
that was amazing to me when I read that.
Well, it was obvious to me. But I went to a Victor Borge concert with a friend of mine, and she is so fast, so witty, so socially informed. I mean, she's better read than almost anybody I know. And we were sitting on the front row, and Victor Borge was doing his routine, and Carlene Fullerton, friend of mine, Carlene was a half beat ahead of the entire audience at the concert hall. And there were a couple thousand people there, and she would get the joke and laugh 2 beats before anybody else got the joke. And her husband got uncomfortable because if you're in a large group like that and you hear one laugh, you're like, who is that? What are they doing? Victor Borge came over and stood in front of her and started telling jokes to her because she was an appreciative audience that got it.
And may have been then facilitating the rest of the theater.
It made the whole thing get better.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she may have laughed first, but the uproarious laughter that happened after that may have been directly because she laughed first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was mad at her because she was faster than I was.
Yeah.
I got it, but I got
I know.
2 beats late.
I can imagine that would be very
frustration for me.
Yeah.
I like to be the fastest guy in the room.
I know you do.
Yeah.
You'd like to draw the quickest.
Yeah.
So,
but I like to shoot the most accurately.
Do you? Yes. And that was
a dominant laugh.
This is a loaded question, and so if you don't like it, then that's fine. Do you think that we have gone overboard in our politically correctness expectation as a society, and do you think that there's any such thing as going too far?
Yes and yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I think there
because I agree. Yeah.
There's so many layers of complexity here. There are seriously wicked and evil things about which we have laughed as a culture that we shouldn't do. We should look at that and say, no, that's not funny. Don't do that. But there are also leverages for political correctness that seem to be intensifying to the point that they take away your opportunity to be spontaneous and be different from the mass, different from the audience. There's a lot of social pressure right now to get in one group or the other. We've really become an us versus them society right now. That'll change, but until it does, we're going to be somewhat more miserable.
Yeah, we are very dipolarly opposed to each other. I mean, it's almost like we can't even agree that two disparaged groups could agree about anything.
When I was a young man, I had a lot of focus on studying about social ranking, status grouping, things like that. Learning what is it, how does it work, what goes on. And one of the things that I observed, later I referenced some research, but at the time it's just something that I observed, was that somebody in one of the lower socioeconomic groups could tell a joke. If they told it in a mixed audience, those people in the higher socioeconomic jokes would look like who farted. They'd smell something bad. They'd be like, you're low. And then that same person would go to their isolated group of higher status individuals and tell that joke, for which the whole higher status group would laugh raucously because the teller was socially acceptable. The material was the same.
Yeah.
If the teller was socially unacceptable in that mixed group, I mean, in the lower socioeconomic group, it might have been funny, it might not have been. But in the mixed group, you got mixed results. But it used to really bother me to discover that those people who would look down their noses at the teller of the joke would then go and tell the joke and get the applause for the laughter of their wit. Just seemed really unfair.
So if you go to a comedy club and the person on stage, you expect them to be funny, that's different than if you tell those same set of jokes in a mixed crowd at a party.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Because you don't know. I mean, the people that have gone to the comedy club have gone there self-selecting.
They expect,
and they know what they're getting.
Yeah. They know that you're going to be funny. They know that
so
there's
if I go to a George Carlin concert and George Carlin talks about 7 words you never say on TV, I'm laughing my head off with the rest of the audience. If I'm sitting at home and somebody tells the same routine, even the same delivery style, I'm going to be offended. Because we don't talk that way. We don't say those words in my house. But I'll go to your comedy club and laugh at you for saying them. It happens.
And so I think that we both got out of this I think we both probably already came into this believing that humor is good.
Well,
laughter
humor
is good.
Yeah. That I agree with.
Okay. And okay, so then what do you mean by you so you didn't
humor
agree
can be aggressive. Humor is a tool.
So what I would say is that the difference between humor being good or not good is whether or not the individual telling the joke is malicious.
Maybe I have to think about that. I think I agree with it, but I was looking in a different bucket. I think it has to do with the audience and the perception of the audience. Is it socially acceptable here?
Okay.
And if I'm in an audience where it's socially acceptable, I'm more likely to see it.
So you're saying the audience gets to decide. I'm saying the teller gets to decide. But you're saying, yeah. No, I think you're probably right. I mean, if we're just looking at the psychology of it, I think you're absolutely correct. I think the audience gets to decide. Yeah. And so then if you're the person who...
If you're the performer, you got to play to the audience.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're not going to be successful. They won't invite you back.
Well, but even let's just say that you're not a performer. You're just a Joe
but
walking
you are
around.
The performer. If I tell a joke, I'm telling it to an audience.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it with an agenda in mind. It's a tool in pursuit of a goal. So my goal is to be aggressive, to cut you down, to shut you up, to say to other people, hey, I'm smarter than he is. So on my side, or it's to deflect. I tell jokes all the time to deflect attention from me and things that I don't want to look at.
Which is something in therapy we would always point out. I think you might be using that.
Therapy.
Yeah, I think you might be using that as a way of deflecting. But
I know.
But what I'm wondering is,
here, chase that. Right.
If somebody came to you for therapy and said, "I'm super funny, but nobody else." Likes it. Nobody else thinks. Yeah. What do you say to that person?
Oh, you're going to have to move somewhere then.
Yeah.
Where they like that kind of stuff.
But I think actually, I've never thought about it this way, but this actually would be very,
like
this has
nudity.
been very elucidating to me. Yeah. So I think now my response to that person would be, if you're going to be funny,
what audience
the audience gets to decide that. And so if your experience is that your audience doesn't think you're funny, then you have to ask yourself, is this worth it to me? Do I need to change my presentation, or do I need to change my audience?
So as a clinician, as a parent, you teach your children about funny once.
Yeah.
Because when kids are learning about jokes, and they, knock, knock, who's there? They tell the same joke 57 times. Well, and you laugh because you're polite. Because your grandparents laugh because they love the kid and they want to learn to tell jokes. But after a while, it's like, yeah. And you have to teach them, stop it. That's funny once. It's not funny again.
So just to kind of wrap this all up, how would you encourage people who do therapy for a living to use the stuff that we're talking about here today in the therapeutic context?
Learn to listen. Learn to ask questions about, okay, how do you understand that? What do you expect to happen? How do people respond? How does that impact you? Don't be judgmental. Don't say that's wrong, you can't do that. Don't be authoritative or authoritarian and say this is how you have to do it. I think you have to explore with the client, what is it that's going on here? What feelings do you have? What message are you sending? What payoff are you getting? Are you getting the payoff you expect to get? Like we work with parents all the time. We talk about sometimes what you say to your kid is not what they hear.
Yeah.
The behavior that you ask for is going to, the behavior you get in response is going to be different because there's a deflection of communication.
Do you believe that it is, I'm going to say okay for lack of a better word, do you believe that it's okay for the therapist to be amused by the client and to express that?
Oh, hell yes, you have to be human.
Okay, yeah.
If you make me laugh, I'm going to laugh.
Because I think there are some people
who
who say,
to you, you know what? Neither one of us should have laughed at that. But
yeah.
For us, it was funny.
Right. But I think there are a lot of people who feel reluctant to allow themselves.
Well, but that goes back to the whole Freudian thing about you being the blank wall, the tabula rasa. You shouldn't have a personality. You shouldn't bring it into the room. I disagree with that approach to therapy.
I think that it is about being genuine and being honest. And so if the client says something that's funny, you can laugh at it. Now, obviously, we don't want to laugh at things that are traumatic to the client.
You have to be able to say, I'm immature, I'm inappropriate.
Right.
But I'm your therapist, so it's okay.
But I don't even think, I've never had to apologize for that in therapy.
I have. And teaching school.
Teaching school, I think, is different because that's a different audience.
Somebody, if you tease somebody, if you have a reaction that they're not expecting and that wounds them, you have to be able to recognize it immediately and apologize honestly so that they feel it. Like, I screwed up. I should not have laughed. I didn't understand the context. I overreacted or reacted too quickly. My fault, my mistake, my bad.
But you believe that it's better for honesty and genuineness to allow yourself to experience and express that emotion, even if you have to correct it with the client. It's better to do it than to be stoic.
Stoic, yeah. As Popeye the Sailor Man said, I am what I am.
Yeah.
So I got to be me. I got to be me.
Got to be me.
Yeah, there you go.
So hopefully that was good for people. And as always, if you want to get a hold of us, you can reach us at psychwithmike.com, where you can find other episodes of the show. We really would like for people to go to iTunes and to the internet's YouTube and subscribe to the show and leave a comment. That is really, really helpful for us. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.